Welcome. I'm Doug Morgan, and you're listening to Uncommon Sense, where we hunt for the truth in the topics you're not supposed to talk about, Christianity and politics. I hear the question asked all the time. Why can't the right and the left get along anymore? Our own President Trump has said that if he came up with a cure for cancer, the Democratic Party would be in support of cancer. President Trump has headed a strike on Iran and taken out the most evil government in the last 50 years, at least, and liberals can't help but protest it. The Daily Wire says congressional Democrats refused to stand during the President Donald Trump's night of the State of the Union address when he asked lawmakers to show support for prioritizing American citizens over illegal immigrants. Quote, I'm inviting every legislator to join with my administration in reaffirming a fundamental principle. This is what Trump said. He said, if you agree with this statement, then stand up and show your support. The first duty of the American government is to protect American citizens, not illegal aliens. Republican lawmakers, of course, stood while Democrats remained seated. And then he says, isn't that a shame? You should be ashamed of yourself not standing up, is what Trump said. That is why I'm also asking you to end deadly sanctuary cities that protect the criminals and enact serious penalties for public officials who block the removal of criminal aliens. That moment was one of several throughout the night when Trump confronted Democrat lawmakers for refusing to stand. Later, during his speech, Trump introduced Sage Blair, a Virginia teen who was taken from her parents after they declined to support her assertion of a male gender identity. According to the counselor's testimony, Blair ultimately returned to her parents following a lengthy legal battle. Surely, here's the quote, surely we can all agree no state can be allowed to rip children from their parents' arms and transition them to a new gender against the parents' will. Who can believe that we're even talking about it? We must ban it, and we must ban it immediately, Trump said. That line drew applause from Republicans, while Democrats remained seated. Quote, look, nobody stands up. These people are crazy. I'm telling you, they're crazy, Trump said. At another point in the address, Trump spoke about the murder of 23-year-old Ukrainian refugee who was stabbed to death on a bus in Charlotte, North Carolina. The man accused in the killing has an extensive, and I mean extensive, criminal record. Democrats remained seated when Trump introduced her mother, Anna, and vowed to get justice for her daughter. Ms. Zarutska tonight, this is the quote, I promise you that we will ensure justice for your magnificent daughter, Irina. This is what Trump said. And he says that, of course, when he said that earned support from the Republican lawmakers. And then Trump asked, how do you not stand, gesturing, of course, toward the Democratic side of the chamber? The moment earned criticism from other Republican lawmakers. If Democrats couldn't stand for Irina Zarutska grieving mother last night, they won't stand for any victim. She wept feet away, and they stayed seated, Republican Mark Harris said. Their silence says it all. Democrats are more about criminals than victims. Democrats also remain seated as Trump highlighted his administration's border security efforts and record stock market gains in the last year. You see, how can you not stand or at least clap for in support of the heroes that were honored that night? And it hasn't always been this way. In fact, I want to play you a clip. And this is of Bill Clinton back in 1995 at his State of the Union speech.
All Americans, not only in the states most heavily affected, but in every place in this country, are rightly disturbed by the large numbers of illegal aliens entering our country. The jobs they hold might otherwise be held by citizens or legal immigrants. The public service they use impose burdens on our taxpayers. That's why our administration has moved aggressively to secure our borders more, by hiring a record number of new border guards, by deporting twice as many criminal aliens as ever before, by cracking down on illegal hiring, by barring welfare benefits to illegal aliens. In the budget I will present to you, we will try to do more to speed the deportation of illegal aliens who are arrested for crimes, to better identify illegal aliens in the workplace as recommended by the commission headed by former Congresswoman Barbara Jordan. We are a nation of immigrants, but we are also a nation of laws. It is wrong and ultimately self-defeating for a nation of immigrants to permit the kind of abuse of our immigration laws we have seen in recent years, and we must do more to stop it.
And so what happened right after that is you're seeing the whole House stand up and clap, not just Democrats, but Republicans as well. And yes, this was President Bill Clinton, not President Trump, saying that. That is what the leader of the Democratic Party said at his State of the Union speech in 1995. This was a time when most Americans at least agreed on many of the same goals. We just often disagreed on how to get there. So what happened? Why is there such a difference in the two ways of thinking, conservatism and liberalism, or, of course, some people like to call it the right and the left? Well, Desiree Harvey of Fox News said this just last year. She said, as the Democratic Party grapples with losses up and down the ballot in 2024, a new report is urging Democrats to moderate their positions on identity politics and cultural issues while embracing affordability, border security, and public safety ahead of competitive midterm elections expected next year. Of course, this was written in October of last year. The future of the party seemed destined for socialism when the trio of self-identified Democrat socialists, New York City Mayor candidate Zoran Mandami, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and Senator Bernie Sanders, joined forces to rally more than 10,000 New York City voters at Forest Hill Stadium on that Sunday. But with 1 week left in the election to Election Day, the report said deciding to win, that was the name of the report, deciding to win, is urging Democrats back to the center. Quote, to win elections, Democrats need to make the following changes. First, we need to focus more on the issues voters do not think we prioritize enough: the economy, cost of living, health care, border security, public safety. And focus less on the issues voters think we prioritize too highly: climate change, democracy, abortion, and identity and cultural issues. That's the authors, Simon Bezelon, I believe is how you pronounce that, Lauren Harper Pope, and Liam Kerr wrote. Quote, second, we need to moderate our positions on issues where our agenda is unpopular, including immigration, public safety, energy production, and some identity and cultural issues. That's what they continue to say. The Democratic Party has been without a clear leader since former Vice President Kamala Harris lost in the 2024 presidential election to President Donald Trump. Ahead of the midterm elections in 2026, the New York City mayor race has dominated the national political stage. New York Democrats, such as House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries and Governor Kathy Hochul, waited months to endorse the Democratic nominee. Republicans, meanwhile, have capitalized on such endorsements as embracing a far left agenda, including Trump, who labeled Mamdani as a communist, a moniker he rejected, of course, but he is. He's a communist. There's no doubt about it. New York City voters who attended the star-studded rally in Queens embraced democratic socialism. Yes, they embraced democratic socialism. Mamdani, AOC, represents the future of the Democratic Party. But released the following day, the Deciding to Win report, first shared with Semaphore, pushes Democrats back to the center. The report is based on thousands of election results, hundreds of political polls and academic papers, dozens of case studies, and surveys of more than 500,000 voters that we conducted with in the 2024 election. According to Semaphore's reporting, elected Democrats are set to receive copies of the report, and there will be events in Washington, D.C. and New York City to promote it. Now, Democratic campaign staffers are more liberal than Democratic voters and are more likely to be, on average, younger, more highly educated, and likely to be white, more likely to be female, and less likely to attend church than both Democratic voters and the overall electorate. This is according to the academic research by the American Political Science Review. Now, while the report finds that most voters are white, most voters are non-college educated, and most voters are over the age of 50, the authors argue that Democrats are, meanwhile, pulled to the left by donors and campaign staffers. Quote, research from Data for Progress shows that Democratic elites are significantly to the left of the general public, and that the gap between Democratic elites and the public is larger than the gap between Republican elites and the public. This is what the report states, arguing that both Democratic voters and campaign staffers push the party to the left, away from the electorate. Quote, to win again, Democrats need to listen more to the voters and less to the out-of-touch donors, detached party elites, and Democratic politicians who consistently underperform the top of the ticket. This is what the authors wrote. And this has created a disconnect between Democratic forces driving the national conversation and the voters who actually turn out for elections, according to that same report. Now, since President Barack Obama won his re-election campaign in 2012, the authors claim that the Democratic Party has moved to the left on essentially every issue. They have moved to the left on essentially every issue. They concluded that today's Democratic Party is more focused on climate change, democracy, abortion, and identity politics than on the economy and the middle class. With that shift, they say more voters now see the party as out of touch. The authors encourage Democrats to refocus policy agendas on lowering costs and building the economy and advocate for popular economic policies as opposed to student loan forgiveness or Medicare for all type stuff. They also urge Democrats to focus less on things like climate change and abortion and more on cost of living. It's actually how Mamdani actually ended up getting elected, was that focus on that. And that includes moderating positions on immigration, public safety, energy production, and some identity or cultural issues, while rejecting economic influence in politics. Quote, first, voters' frustrations with the status quo are not the same as the desire for socialism. And second, criticizing the status quo is a complement to advocating for popular policies on the issues that matter most to the American people, not a substitute, said the authors. The authors acknowledge that Democrats have much to learn from Mamdani, AOC, and Sanders about prioritizing affordability, just as they should from Democratic Senator Ruben Gallego and his approach to border security in Arizona. Democrats should prioritize an unwavering focus on the economic issues that are the top priorities of working class Americans while meeting voters where they are on issues like immigration and public safety, according to the authors. Now, while pushing Democrats to the center, the authors argue that deciding to win does not advocate for giving up on party's core values or for refusing to stand up for disadvantaged groups or things like that. The report encourages Democrats to be brave, rejecting third-party demands and embracing new media platforms and unscripted events with voters rather than listening to consultants whose greatest fear is their candidate making a mistake. so yeah, that's what is happening here, is that the Democrats have taken a huge turn to the left. In fact, even Nicole Russell of the USA Today, which you can't say has ever been a right-wing publication, right? Nicole Russell of USA Today said in February, most or more than a year has passed since President Donald Trump began his second term as the Democratic Party's chief political rival. His return to office might have been expected to energize Democrats and create momentum. Instead, the party has veered leftward and struggled to unite its base, while many voters are dissatisfied with its direction. Even though a few Democratic candidates have nabbed wins in recent special elections, new polling from the Associated Press, NORC Center for Public Affairs Research, shows that Democrats are still down on their own party. Yeah, they themselves are down on their own party. About 7 in 10 Democrats have a positive view of the Democratic Party, and they're much less positive than they've been in previous years. I think I know why, he says. She says the answer will continue to wreak havoc on the Democratic Party and could be a boon for Republicans if they can get out of their own way and better capitalize on their wins. Like, for instance, Democrats have veered too far to the left, she says. CNN's data analysis, Harry Enton, presented data recently that shows a whopping 58% of voters say Democratic Party is too liberal. Quote, the Democrats are moving to the left. The far left is gaining power, and there could be some electoral repercussions because what we see right now is voters, the clear majority, say that they are too liberal. At the same time, Enton said 42% of Democrats think themselves as democratic socialists. Yes, they think of themselves, 42% of Democrats think of themselves as democratic socialists under the age of 35, just like Zoran Mandani. Now, Enton said New York's choice to elect Democratic Socialists, Mamdani, is not some aberration, he says, but something that we are seeing grow within the Democratic Party. 1/3 of all Democrats identify as Democratic Socialists. As Enton added, my goodness gracious, indeed. Democrats should already see why this is a problem. It's a problem for Democrats that a majority of the general electorate views the party as, well, ideologically too far to the left. The implication for the midterm elections could be huge. If this perception persists, Democrats may still struggle in 2026 and 2028 in suburban swing districts, Rust Belt states, and moderate-leaning battleground states that Trump swept in 2024. The fact that the Democratic Party has swung more progressive rather than moderate, perhaps in response to Trump, is troubling. The election of Mamdani showcased this phenomenon as Exhibit A. Mamdani's leadership has already been disappointing, as I predicted it would be, she says. And after campaigning on affordability, Mamdani just proposed a 9.5% property tax increase on all residences, unless Governor Kathy Hochul lets him just tax the wealthiest New Yorkers. His preliminary 2027 budget also has proposed a $22 million decrease in the New York Police Department and their $6.4 billion budget. So much for the warmth of collectivism, eh? So what does this mean for Democrats? Well, the Democratic Party's base wants bold progressive policy, but the general electorate seems more moderate. This dichotomy provides an opportunity for both parties. Democrats should read the room, take their progressives, and swing back to the land of moderation. Think more former President Bill Clinton and less Bernie Sanders. Yet, even in Texas, Democrats continue to test this. Though, nowhere near the socialist, Representative Jasmine Crockett, and she's crazy. I'm just going to add, she's crazy. Jasmine Crockett is progressive, combative, and controversial. She has quickly become recognized as one of the party's leaders. She's leading in polls for her primary bid for the U.S. Senate, although the race is tightening between her and the state representative, James Tellerico, who was a kind of a moderate, sort of. Tellerico gained a boost from his appearance on the well, it was cut, but we talked about this on the podcast, the Stephen Colbert interview. But while Crockett might be ahead now, she might not fare well against a Republican challenger. Typically in Texas, more progressive Democrats fail when pitted against Republicans. If Republicans are smart, they will continue to weaponize Democrats' increasingly progressive and progressiveness as a weakness and counter this with better messaging. Trump's economy is doing well, but the message isn't always coming across clearly. Presenting this more effectively could show Americans that Republicans oppose the most extreme positions of Democrats, focusing instead on political issues that impact everyday citizens rather than on ideological stances that many Americans may find unappealing. Republicans, too, should tweak their focus away from far-right extremes, kind of that horseshoe right, and focus on reasonable conservatives. In fact, it seems like Democrats still hate Trump so much that they don't even like themselves or who they have become. If they don't turn around soon, by November midterm elections in 2028, they only have themselves to blame if America voters reject their progressive ideas. I would agree with that. And I think there's just this huge polarization, but there's a polarization paradox. William Galston of Brookings, even 3 years ago, kind of recognized this when he said, during the past 4 decades, the two major political parties have steadily moved farther away from each other and are now as deeply divided as they've been for more than a century. Since the early 1990s, according to Gallup, Democratic voters have shifted more to the left than Republican voters have to the right. And in 1994, the second year of Bill Clinton's presidency, 25% of Democrats thought of themselves as liberal, and the same share, 25%, called themselves conservative. As a strong plurality of Democrats, 48% identify as moderate. And as we just stated, that those numbers have shifted even wider now, to where about 45% think of themselves in the Democratic Party as liberal. Well, by 2022, the second year of Joe Biden's presidency, the picture had entirely changed. An outright majority of Democrats, 54%, now call themselves liberal. Yep, it's 54%. Sorry, I think I said 45. It's 54. While the share of conservatives fell to just 10%. Moderates, who once outnumbered the party's liberals by 23 percentage points, now trailed them by 18 points. The Republican Party has changed far less during this period, largely because it has long been more ideologically homogenous at the grassroots. In 1994, 58% of Republicans were conservative, a figure that rose to 72% in 2022. During these 3 decades, Republican moderates fell from 33% to 22%, while Republican liberals, already an endangered species in the early 1990s, declined from 8% to just 5%. But for Democrats, the ideological changes have varied significantly along racial and ethnic lines. In 1994, white, black, and Hispanic Democrats were equally likely to think of themselves as liberal. But during the next 3 decades, the share of white Democrats who identify as liberal rose by 37 points, from 26% to 63%. while Black and Hispanic Democrats rose by less than half as much, to 39% and 41%, respectively. The outcome, unlike 3 decades ago, the Democratic Party is now a coalition of white liberals and non-white voters, the majority of whom think of themselves as moderate or conservative. It is not a coincidence that the majority of whites who voted for Joe Biden in 2020 rarely, if ever, attend church, while more than 90% of Black Biden supporters attend monthly or more. Nor was it a kind of anomaly that the mostly Black primary voters in South Carolina backed Joe Biden, the most moderate Democratic candidate in the 2020 election, propelling him to victory in 2020 contest for the presidential nomination. The analysis for Hispanics is more complex. Most attend religious services regularly, but Hispanic Catholics are more likely to identify with Democrats than are Hispanic evangelicals, whose share of the Hispanic vote has been increasing significantly. We also know that Hispanics are skeptical of parties they regard as increasingly liberal and conservative. In a study released on January 18th of 2023, 46% of Hispanic voters said that the Democratic Party has moved too far to the left, compared to 41% who said that the Republican Party has moved too far to the right. These figures mirror the electorate as a whole, more evidence that Hispanics are becoming a swing vote rather than a reliable pillar for the Democratic base. This analysis of ideological change within the parties leaves several questions unanswered. Many voters are liberal on economic issues, but conservative on cultural issues, or vice versa. And when such voters identify themselves ideologically, it is not always clear which element of their outlook is taking priority. Nor is it clear that the meaning of ideological labels has remained constant over time. Still, there is a close and enduring relationship between ideological self-identification and voting patterns. Almost all liberals will vote for Democrats and conservatives for Republicans, while moderates are more likely to shift between parties based on the specific choices they confront. Hillary Clinton received just 52% of the moderate vote in her 2016 defeat, while Joe Biden generated 64% in his 2020 victory, because almost 4 in 10 voters are moderates. Their votes are often decisive. Although the analysis of party conditions through the lens of ideology is imperfect, it helps reveal the structure of party composition. And it explains why going too far in one direction or the other can diminish a party's chances of winning, as it did in 2020 and in key state races in 2022. So I say that liberals, they don't seem to be getting it, really. Liberals like to call what they are as democratic socialists. In fact, the newest mayor of Seattle is Katie Wilson, and she calls herself a democratic socialist. The newest mayor of New York City, of course, Zoran Mandani, and he calls himself a democratic socialist. Democratic socialist is just a fancy name for Marxism. Marxism is incompatible with democracy or a representative republic. It is. They cannot coexist. John Adams, I love this. John Adams, he, of course, the signer of the Declaration of Independence and second president of the United States. He wrote in 1798. There we go. He wrote in 1798 about the U.S. Constitution. This is what he wrote. He said, "Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other." I want to repeat that one more time. I want you to get this. John Adams, our second president, one of our founding fathers, he says, "Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly and inadequate to the government of any other. It's so good. The reason that we are having a harder time getting along politically now than before is that the left has taken control of the Democratic Party and has taken a giant swerve to the left. Our system of government takes a moral and religious people to rule, or it just simply doesn't work. I would love to hear what your thoughts are on it. Of course, you can always do that at uncommonsensepodcast.com. Thank you very much for listening.
This podcast is a production of Morganite Communications.